I applied to banks and insurance companies. I had no idea what I was looking for. I had to get a job, so I got a job selling life insurance. What happened, it was a sales commission selling life insurance, which I didn't know at the time, but I was 22 years old and I had nothing to lose. And I just said, I'll give it a few years because I had nowhere else to go with work. No one else hired me. So I managed to stay in the business, but that company then closed. I had to go find another company to work from. And that's actually the most important move I made because I still struggled. I had met my future wife at the time she worked, and I just grounded my way through it. So in the toughest times, Rena, I just reminded myself on the back end of this, I think there's some independence and some opportunities for growth and future financial success. I just have to get through these years. I needed to make a sale. I was really in a bad way, and you have a draw against commissions, and I was quite far behind. I knew the one I should have sold, but until I rang the doorbell, I really wasn't sure which one I was going to pull out. And that was my test.
Success can mean different things to different people. For my guest today, other than metrics, success is also about impact, purpose, and the legacy you leave behind. In this episode of Thriving Changes, I sit down with Winston Pain, an entrepreneur, community leader, and coach, for a conversation about vision, values, and personal growth. From early struggles in business to leading major community initiatives and mentoring others, Winston shares the lessons and mindset shifts that shaped his journey. Let's dive in. Before we begin today's conversation, if you found value in this channel, please consider subscribing to Thriving Changes. It's free, it takes less than a minute, but it truly means a lot to us. That one simple action of yours helps us reach more people, share more stories, and continue our mission of inspiring others to take their first step towards thriving changes. Hi, Winston.
Hello, Rena. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Thriving Changes. It's so good to have you.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I don't know your whole story, so I'm really curious what's going to unfold in this podcast.
It's not too exciting.
Oh, I'm sure it is. So you're a hard person to find it. You're a very elusive person, at least on the social media. There's no LinkedIn profile. There are no social media pages. So when I was doing my research, I said, okay, how do I learn more about him? You did challenge my research skills too. But whatever little that I could find out was that, of course, you still are an entrepreneur, but largely 24, 26 years, you were in the insurance business. Were a former co-owner of two general insurance companies. But there's another side of you, which is you love to play tennis. And you won a bronze in the racquetball tournament, and you represented Team Canada.
Yeah, back in 2011. It's a 4-racket sport competition, and I played that, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. This ups the game. And then, of course, you sold your business. When did you sell your business?
2013.
2013. But since then, you've been pretty active in your community as well. You've helped build a $4 million tennis facility in your neighborhood. And you've also been awarded a business award for over 40 in leadership.
Yeah, in our community, they acknowledged a few people that were over 40, top 20 over 40, they called it. So I was one of them, yeah.
So there are quite a few accolades that you carry. But it didn't start off like that, right?
No.
Yes, all the success and all the fancy titles, but your initial years were a struggle. So I would love to dig deeper into that.
Sure. Do you want me just to start where I think it started?
Let's start with just give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself. That's how I invite my guests to tell us a little bit about themselves and then dig into the story.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I started the insurance business in 1987. I sold our two brokerages in 2013. So lots of stories happened in between that point, a lot of struggles and whatnot. I moved back to BC, and we have two kids who are now in their 30s, two young boys, and they're both married. And yes, I sold our business in 2013, and I got into the coaching business in 2020. I found Christian Simpson through the John Maxwell organization. He then went on and formed the Conscious Coaching Academy. So I went through his fairly vigorous regime to come out with the European Mentoring Counseling Council's designation as coach through his organization. And I've been working with business owners and leaders in my community ever since, and just finished my first book, and I'm enjoying the journey, and I'm always curious where it takes me in the coaching field.
Wow. All right. Let's start now digging into that. You of course, we've spoken that you own those two businesses, but then it didn't really start off in that way.
Yeah. So I graduated from university in 1987, and it was funny. I applied to banks and insurance companies. I had no idea what I was looking for. I just needed a job. I'd met my future wife, and I said, I'm staying in Ontario at the time, and I had to get a job. So I got a job selling life insurance, and Crown Life was my first company. Anyways, what happened, it was a sales commission selling life insurance, which I didn't know at the time, but I was 22 years old and I had nothing to lose. And I just said, I'll give it a few years because I had nowhere else to go with work. No one else hired me. So I managed to stay in the business. There's a huge attrition rate in life insurance sales, as you can all probably imagine. They fall off quickly, but I was actually the last person standing out of 20 recruits after 18 months. But that company then closed. I had to go find another company to work from. And that's actually the most important move I made because I still struggled, but I found my lifetime mentor at that company. He was the top agent in Canada. He was a crusty old guy to everybody else, but he was also a tennis fan, and that was our natural connection. And he and I, on long story short, he took me under his wing. His name was John, and he just passed away last year. And John just shared with me his principles on growth and how to move forward in life. It was not just about selling life insurance. They were life lessons. And so I came away from that opportunity. I moved back west to BC. So John and I parted ways, but we stayed in touch throughout the rest of our lives and traveled quite a bit together, did things together. But then I came back to BC, failed one more time, where I tried another insurance opportunity. It didn't go well. But in that opportunity, I met a person who owned a general insurance office in a town about 40 kilometers away. And he ended up saying to me, you should really try general insurance. I think you'll be better at it than life insurance. And long story short, he was absolutely right. It was a better fit for me. He had a small office in a small town, and 15 years later, with the business partner who I'd met at the same time, she was my age in that office, we bought another office in the halfway journey, and we bought a couple of buildings that we operated from, and we were able to sell it all to one company who was consolidating. The big guys were starting to eat the little guys in 2013, and we saw that coming. So we were able to sell both offices back then. And that's my insurance journey. It was 26 years, but it was packed with lots of changes and lots of growth and lots of learning.
Yeah, I would love to dig into those learning, your changes, your failures, and your learnings a little bit more. Can you dig a little deeper in those struggles, each of those struggles?
Yeah, I go back to my father. My father was a self-employed person. I watched him all his life. He was a traveling salesman with ladies' clothing. So he would travel across the country and sell to stores in each of the bigger cities and across Canada. Anyways, I grew up answering the phone for his customers when they would phone, and I saw my dad out there doing his own thing. And we had a middle-class upbringing. We never lacked for anything, but I just watched how hard my dad worked. And I asked him one day, I said, why don't you just make your life easier? And he says, I can't work for anybody. He says, no one will work as hard as me, and I hate to have a ceiling in my life. I just don't want to have any limits in my life. And then I started to watch what that was allowing him to do. He worked hard, but he did it on his own terms. And I realized, I think I inherited his independent lone wolf streak, because all through my life, I've never swam with the tide. I've always swam upstream, right back to my high school years. I just did that. So when I was in my first insurance opportunity and it wasn't going well, my dad had actually told me, give it 5 years. He said, nothing really happens for 5 years. You can't. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it 5 years. So in those first couple of years when things were not going well, I just said, I have to find a way to make this work. I had very low expenses. I had met my future wife at the time. She worked, and I just grounded my way through it. So in the toughest times, Rena, I just reminded myself on the back end of this, I think there's some independence and some opportunities for growth and future financial success. I just have to get through these years. And it was really just holding true to because I also said, I don't want to go work for somebody else. I don't want to get a job at a bank or be employed by somebody. I want to give this the honest, good opportunity here. And that got me through. To be honest with you, it was my mentor. Then I met John 3 years into my life insurance journey, and he strengthened that resolve. He just kept his advice to me was get it done early. Just do the right things and get it done early. And he did that in his life. He was 48 years old at the time. I was 30, and he was financially independent and was leading all kinds of different studies, groups of men. He was just living his own life on his own terms. And I saw that. And I went, I want that. I really want that. Not because of the money. I didn't know how much money he had. It didn't matter. He had freedom. He had independence. And I just said, I have to get through this. I have to find a way. Because I started to look in the insurance industry, and there was lots of successful people who that was their medium to get there. And that's all I knew at the time. So I said, I think I can find my way in this industry. But I didn't know it was going to be on the general insurance side. So that one came later. But it was staying true to myself. And just, I'll share a story with you too. This was a really good story for me. In my second year, I needed to make a sale. I was really in a bad way, and you have a draw against commissions, and I was quite far behind. So I had gone to a small town in Ontario, a young couple. He was a laborer, and they had a young child. So I drove down, and I had two proposals with me. One was a big whole life insurance, big commission, wrong product. And then I had the right product, low commission, lots of coverage, term insurance. I knew the one I should have sold, but until I rang the doorbell, I really wasn't sure which one I was going to pull out. And Len opened the door. His name was Len, and his wife's in the background with their baby. And they said, oh, come on in, Winston. Great to see you. So right away, I knew I got to sell the right product. And that was my test, because it was at probably the worst financial time in my journey. But I said, I'll never sell the wrong product. If I do, I'll leave the industry. So I did draw a line. I said, I'm not going to cross my integrity. That would have been the wrong thing to do. So that was a test early. So I knew, okay, I'm not going to go that way. I just have to grind it out and find a way. So that was an important story in my journey. So
it's integrity, staying connected to your values of what you wanted to be, regardless that money came later. That was not the goal. We see this so often out there, like people are hesitant. They like to test the waters before they jump in, simply because of this, that what am I being sold, and is it the right product for me? Because we see that kind of sale happening so often. But going back into, dig a little more into the story of your failures and bringing in your mentor. So you mentioned that one was when your dad told you, give it 5 years. And then when John came into the picture and he emphasized similar concepts into you. What I'm hearing is it's about a vision, that you have a certain vision.
Yeah. Two things about John. So he did mirror my father's advice, but he talked about something I had never heard before. He says, do the things that unsuccessful people will not do. So at that time in my life, John was a unique life insurance agent. He said to me, you have to make 10 phone calls a day to book appointments. Don't stand by the water cooler. Don't prepare presentations. Don't get lost on the fluff. Make 10 calls a day. He says, and if you do that every day, you'll book 3 appointments, and then you'll have a full schedule. In John's office, his desk was turned with his back, with looking out the window. He didn't want to see people walking by the door. So he turned his back to the door, and he would make his 10 calls every day, and he had his 3 appointments, and he made his sale every day. But he says, if you don't do that, the unsuccessful people, you'll follow them, because so I never did that in the life insurance business. I could never mirror that part of John. But the takeaway was, do the things that unsuccessful people don't want to do, and do them regularly, make them a habit. The biggest thing he also had me do at 30 years old, we had 2 young kids. We were living in an apartment. We had nothing. We were just, it was ugly. He told me, he says, I want you to go home and write a letter to yourself. Write a letter to your 40-year-old self, or have your 40-year-old self write a letter back to you. And I want that person to describe to you in as much detail as possible, where are you living? How many kids you got? What are you doing in the community? What are your kids doing? What do you, as a family, as a parent, as a husband? So it was a future self exercise. He didn't call it that, but that's what it was. So I went home and I said, this doesn't feel right. But I ended up writing a letter as much as I could let my mind. And he said, blue sky it. He says, do not put limits on this. Let your mind go as far as it can go. So I still have that. it's part of the book I've just written. It's called Becoming Your Future Self. So I have that. I drew a picture, a black and white, I'm a horrible artist, of a picture of me living on a lake with a tennis court and a hot tub, and didn't know where the lake was, didn't know any, it was this picture. And then I did write a letter, like specifics, like some financial numbers, and I'll have this many kids, I'll have this many clients, this kind of thing. And so that exercise, initially I thought, what a waste of time. This is never going to happen. But I then developed I call it the 5-section notebook. I went and bought one of these. I just have it here. So these notebooks, 5 sections.
Yeah.
So I went and bought one, and in every one of these, I have 25 of these, 25 years. I would draw the full person. So there's community, personal, business, and then I would break each section, and I would just started to make my goals for every year. But that vision, that 10-year vision, was always, I didn't review that letter very often, but I kept it. But it was in here, and without me really realizing it, that's what drove me to break it down into yearly, annual pieces where I could then somehow eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? I thought, how am I going to do this? So that was my solution to get this book, break it down. And I'm going off topic here, but that's how I took that big vision and tried to eat it. And every year I would review that letter or that note to myself, but it kept changing because as you start to achieve things and grow, that initial letter changed. Those weren't my limits anymore. I kept upping the game a bit, but that was the starting point where I allowed myself to dream. And it was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm trying to do. And it worked.
You're not going off topic, by the way. I'll just into it. Okay. This is exactly what we want to talk about, digging into it. And how did you accomplish your success? Before I forget, you said that you didn't follow one advice of John's, which was making those 10 calls. So how did you get your sales?
So life insurance for me was a horrible fit. To be a successful life insurance agent, you need to, how do I say this? General insurance is more service. You have to have house insurance, you have to have car insurance, you have to have commercial liability insurance. So it's almost like a commodity where here's our prices, competitors' prices, but then you get the service side where I could say to the customer, I'll be there for you. And I proved it. If they bought from me, I was there for a claim and all that kind of thing. Life insurance was more of you have to be a true salesman in the sense that you really have to sell people on why they have to have life insurance because you didn't have to buy life insurance, right? And the successful agents would just find bigger people buying bigger policies. John eventually was selling policies, huge policies to big business owners. And I was 22 years old at the time. And I tended to sell within 10 years of my age. So I might have had 30, 40-year-old clients at the most. And you're selling term insurance, which is low commission. And I was never really good at prospecting. There were lots of ways to develop. Rena, thanks for your policy. Do you have 3 friends that I could talk to? I was terrible at that. I got enough clients. I did welcome wagon bridal shows, called those lists. I did do some cold calling, enough to keep me in the business because I knew I needed to find a way in the business. And I guess that's how I could sum up my life insurance career. I was successful enough to stay, but I was never successful financially in it.
It's much of a personality difference, right? Some people are natural at it. And I don't know if they're natural at it, but they develop it and they're able to do it. I'm in a similar boat like you. I totally get it. But knowing you now that I've known you for some time and you're such a people's person, you're introverted, you're reserved and all that. But when you talk, you're a very one-to-one, very people-oriented person, very other-focused. You get into the story, get to know an individual. That's what my experience has been with you.
Well, thank you.
I totally get it that the service industry fits you better, where you offer something which is of value and you prove your value through that service. So I totally get that. Coming back to the vision, did you change the metrics also every year on it?
No, great question. I didn't. I had the broader categories. Again, personal, community, financial, and fitness. Actually, I'm active fit. I keep track of my fitness stuff. So there was one whole section of the book tracking my fitness activities daily. And they stayed the same, but both within each component though, like for example, community, when we bought into the general insurance business, we bought into it. I was in a community arena of 15,000 people. So when you work in a community that small, If you're not good at what you do, it becomes apparent real quickly. Word travels. But alternatively, if you're good at it, word travels too. And what I was taught by the person that we bought from, he said, come to work Monday morning, open the door, and serve the person that walks in the door. I didn't make one cold call after that when I got in general insurance. He says, you just take care of the customer you have. That person's going to buy a second policy, a third policy. They're going to tell their friends. He says, that's all you have to do. Just cover it. And so that was beautiful advice. And I was like, great, finally, I can do that. And Joan was my business partner. She and I were the same page. We were both the same kind of person. And we did that. And we also did one thing that a lot of people, this was huge. We both got very active in the community. That's where my nonprofit leadership came. I joined a few of the key organizations in town, became the chair of those organizations. So I was able to develop myself differently in those rooms. And that led to a lot of different nonprofit leadership roles I've held. I've actually, if you look at my life in general, my insurance days, I was a good broker, I was a good agent, worked hard. I wasn't the best agent in the world, and I was not the most knowledgeable. I was just good at what I did, and I did it consistently. But where I really took off is in my nonprofit leadership roles. That's where I developed my leadership skills. And I realized I was engaging. I was a good collaborator, but then I was able to move organizations forward. Okay, we've got all our advice, we've got all our information. Let's make some decisions now. Let's keep moving. And I was pretty good at being part of the strategic planning of those organizations. So that's where I realized, but that's coaching. And what I realized, and I didn't know it at the time, I've always coached. I've always been a good listener. I've always listened with the intent to understand, not to reply. You know how some people, when you listen to people, like they're not listening at all. They're just waiting to reply. I never did that. And I realized I need to grow that. And that's where, when you talk about purpose, coaching has become it's like it fits it for the rest of my life. I'll be doing this. It's what I want to do. And it's helping other people succeed on their terms. That's what coaching is. And so, that's how I got into coaching. But that's what the nonprofit work allowed me to really grow. But
so what kind of nonprofit organizations were you part of?
So in the Downtown Improvement Association, which is the local merchants in an area, I was president of that. The biggest one, though, this is really interesting. There was a fellow in our community very bright guy who was trying to build and maintain trails in our region. He was trying to develop and then alternate transportation with people, getting people out of their cars onto bikes and walking. So he was developing trails in our region. And 2 years into what they called the Shoe Shop Trail Alliance, he was just struggling because he would get a little bit of grant money. He would then get a local property owner or the First Nations bands or the cities. They'd say, oh, we want some trail here. So he would then get some volunteers, get some grant money, and then get a little bit of money from the stakeholder. Like these stakeholders were getting trails built or maintained for 20 cents on the dollar. And he was doing this over and over again. And I said to him, how are you going to sustain that? And he goes, I don't know. He says, it's working. And they had formed a nonprofit group. I said to him, I'll come on the board. I won't build a meter or trail for you, but I'll try to make this thing sustainable, try to get it there. After 9 years, we got funding agreements with the local government to fund operational dollars to help. So annually now, that organization gets $150,000 from the different regional districts and cities where the trails are being built. And I negotiated those I went to the councils and negotiated all that on behalf of the trail line. So that was my commitment to Phil, is his name. So in 2017, I came off the board knowing that group is sustainable, and it's still running today, and they're doing marvelous things. So that's where I learned the most until I got involved with the tennis project. And then everything I had was thrown into the tennis project. That one was a colossal passion play for me. And it was 7 years of my life that physically and mentally took a lot out of me. But we managed to get a $4 million tennis building built, permanent structure. We built it. I was out there with 67-year-old guys hanging 40 feet in the air. We were operating lifts. I was hanging metal and sheet metal. But we had to do the business plan, fundraising, and get all the civic stuff lined up because the city owned the land. So we needed them to back our loan, and we raised $1 million plus in different ways. That one pushed me to the limit because I co-chaired that with a fellow that it was our dream to do. And the whole community came in behind that. But what I learned from the Trail Alliance and all those other things, plus owning my own business, it all came together, and we got that done in 2020. It opened December of 2019.
Oh, wow.
and then COVID shut us down, but we still managed to get through the COVID year. I'm going off here, but that was the sum total of all I had. That's my legacy piece, if I can say it. So
because you've done it before. If my research is right, This may not be metrics like you've completed projects, but if we go back to your businesses, the insurance businesses, it multiplied nine folds, if I'm not wrong.
It did, yeah. We bought it with 5 employees. We sold, we had 25 employees. We bought an office 5 years in. We bought another office in a small community close to us. And we just served. And again, I mean, it was back to that mantra, take care of the customer walking in the door. And that's what we drummed into our staff. And our staff we also had a very coaching approach to them. Every year we had reviews with them and we said, what do you guys want to do? What's your goal? And every person had a different goal. So we would advance them along. We never kept them doing one thing. And so it's like a cord, right? You just strengthen it makes it tougher. And our employees they were motivated. They were empowered to learn. We never hammered them if they made mistakes. They were learning opportunities. And that's why when we sold, the company that bought us didn't even have to bring in a manager. They were able to run the 2 offices with the leadership that was in the office already. So they didn't have to bring in someone from the outside. So we were proud of that. That's something.
It makes total sense because you're saying that when you engage your employees and they had their own plans, and so they were invested in it, and they were invested in themselves and invested in the company as well, which increases engagement, right?
Yeah. Every early December, we would meet with every employee and we'd sit down with them, Joan and myself, and we would just, it was never you're doing this good, you're doing this bad. It was like, we would say, here's what we've seen. And we do, of course, the salary review and all that was part of that. But the bulk of that conversation was, how are you doing? What do you think you're doing well? What do you think you could do better? What do you need from us? So if it was a course or whatever, because we always invested in, if there was a course or something we could put them in, we did that. But to your point, it tightened the engagement. We were on the same page. It was never us against them, or we were all rowing the boat in the same direction. And they knew, they watched us too. We put in a ton of time in the business. It was never like we were sitting up twiddling our thumbs watching them work. They saw us pulling our weight, and it was a real good teamwork environment. And you hear this all the time, but we practiced it. I'm happy to say I've gone to organizations that don't do reviews annually, and it blows my mind. It's such a lost opportunity. You have to listen to what your employees want. Some employees wanted to go fast. They wanted to go faster than they could. So we had to pull them back. Some of them didn't want to go anywhere. They were happy. They wanted to get better at what they were doing. So we'd help even that person. We'd say, we're going to push you a little bit. We want you to do this. So we would always make them stretch a little bit because stretching was important. But every employee felt that they'd come to work and they had something that they wanted to do different. They were always moving them along. So it was important.
I guess this conversation is so relevant to the times that we are in, because with such low engagement, I've had this conversation, I think, a number of times in the last couple of months. And to your point that so many organizations are missing out on this piece where they are not listening to what their employees want, they need, and how can they engage them in the process. And with so much change happening, there's so much disruption right now. And there's a new model coming in with AI and with layoffs and cost cuts. But are we taking care of our people in the process? So
yeah, I just think the rate of change right now is faster than if we were to own our business today. A lot of industries I've had lots of conversations with CPAs and legal and people in our industry, and insurance is a commodity. It's an apple. We have 2 apples here. The contracts and wordings are very similar. So then it often comes down to price and what price plus whatever, like the intangibles. But the method of delivery has become so streamlined that the rate of change has been rapid, and industries are moving slower than what the change can accommodate. So I think that's the challenge. Right. Yeah, it's interesting times.
Yeah. I'm really curious how it's going to unfold and what that new norm is going to look like. All right, coming back to your story, how do you look back at it all?
I've been lucky. I've had some incredible people give me a leg up, John in particular. So one of my favorite quotes is, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And if I were to sum my life up, I knew what I wanted. And when opportunities presented themselves that fit, I took them. I acted. And I think the first part of that is you need to know what you're looking for. And when I go back to my future self, when I drew that first 30 years old, that lake tennis court bit, I said, oh my God, this seems so far off. But I just found ways, like I knew what I was looking for, or I knew what I thought I needed to get where I was looking for. So in that process, I didn't get there. It was never a straight journey, but I acted on opportunities because I knew. And that, I think if I summed it up, Rena, because of that exercise John had me do. If I had never done that exercise, I never would have known what I was looking for, and I probably would have taken anything. Because when we had the two young kids, we were in a bad way financially. Like when we moved back west, it was ugly. I would get bills. I wouldn't open them. I said, I'm going to pay the bill that's calling me this month. So they're going to shut me off. I'll pay that one, because it was really ugly for about a year and a half, 2 years. And my wife's a university educated lady. She was supporting me, and I just felt I got to make this work. But she never forced me out to go get a real job, as I call it. She said, just find a way quick. So, like she always said, we'll do this. I'll go work some job, which she did. But yeah, if I can sum it up that way, I just never gave up on the vision.
Yeah. Two questions. Did that original vision come true? You had everything?
Yeah. So it's funny. In my new book, I put a picture of that drawing. And so what happened? So I have a lake view. We live in a beautiful community. So my living room looks out of the beautiful lake view. And 2 blocks away is where this beautiful tennis club is, where we built indoor tennis, nestled into a park. So that's part of the story too, is when you do those visioning, it doesn't always go exactly the way you think it will, but it's remarkable. And that's one of the things I always marvel at. I really have what I have in that picture that I drew. It's just in 2 different parts. And as it turns out, the picture I drew actually was a log home. Having sold insurance, I realized I don't want to own a log home. They're hard, they're hard to maintain. They're super expensive, and I don't like. They're dark. So I said, so that's funny how that dream, I thought I wanted that, but yeah, it did end up.
Those minor details can change. We need to be flexible and adaptable to those things along the way. And as you said, that you no longer wanted it. You would rather have what you want than stick to an image. And
yeah. I will share this too with you. So now I've just wrote I'm 61. So my 71-year-old self just wrote myself a letter. I've been doing this throughout my life. But what I've noticed now is it's not quantifiable stuff anymore. It was easy when you had nothing. It was like, okay, I'd like to live here. I'd like to do this. It's not that anymore. Now it's about impact. It's about how do you qualitatively talk about impacting people and coaching and empowering people. So I found it very difficult this time, and I'm still struggling with it because the measurables are completely different now. And I think that's something that is also a good point, is what you were measuring 10, 20, 30 years ago is going to change. And that has, for me, that's been my experience.
All right. So you did answer my second question that I'm about to ask, is that you still do those exercises, and it turns out you do.
Yep. This is my 2026 book. Yeah.
Right. So what's next for you?
So 3 years ago, I started coaching. So I have one-to-one clients. I organically get them through my email marketing, because you're right, I'm not a social media person. I'm not engaged that way, and I'm by choice, and that's probably wrong, but that's part of this conversation too. I'm not trying to scale up and have 100 one-to-one clients. That would scare me to death. What I've done is I'm trying to keep it to 6 to 8 so I can manage to do that while I'm trying to build some group coaching and get the book out and see if I can start creating opportunities that way. But for me, it's trying to have more scope and scale. How can I do that? Because doing one-to-one coaching is great, but I'd like to have more impact if I can somehow with more people. And that's where I'm at right now, Rena. I'm trying to figure out how to make that happen. And I have a second book coming after the book I've got. I hope to have it out by the end of the year. So I think that, and then how do I use those books to leverage that into opportunities? That's where I'm at right now with the journey.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your books. You've mentioned them a couple of times. So you have one coming out now.
So this is funny. So this is the cover of it.
All right.
It's coming from a publisher in Ireland that I worked with, that she's getting that done. One of the things I did do, which I realized is really important, is email marketing. Everyone talks about that, but about a year and a half ago, and I was uncomfortable doing this because I'm a private person, as you know, but I said, I sent out an email to about 150 business people that I knew. And I said, if you're interested, once a week, I'm going to send out a short 350, 400 word message, something positive, maybe something I've read, or a story, or just something that might be thought-provoking. It always ends with questions for the reader. It's never about, I did this, I did that. It's like, it might bring in a story of me, or like a shared story. But anyways, I've sent out about 70 of those once a week. I've done it religiously once a week. And I've started to create all kinds of conversations off those. People reply, and people, let's go for a coffee. So actually, I've created 4 or 5 one-to-one clients from those emails. So that's been really fun for 2 reasons. I actually enjoy writing them. I didn't realize that I have different quirky things in there that I want to get out. Or I'm reading a book right now. So this week's one was, I'm reading this in this book. Interesting concept. What do you guys think? So they're actually creating engagement within my circle. And that's one thing that email marketers tell you. If you have 300 or 400 people in your circle and that's better than having a million Facebook followers who are just passing by. So that's been a focus. And as a result of those emails, this book came out of this. I just took the top 29 emails I had, and they were really the Future Self letter is my first chapter. So I share that story, and then I provide a template on how to write that letter. But it's just shared stories about intuition, about the notebook, the 5-section notebook. I talk about that. So it's a book, it's a toolkit. I'm a fellow traveler. I'm not a guru. I'm just a guy who has stepped into it, and I'm learning along the way, and I still am. So I put myself out that way because I don't have the answer. You do. You do. I'm just going to help you find it, hopefully with a good question. But that book, I enjoyed it. Every chapter is an important part of my story, and I was able to capture them in there and put them. So it's a short book, and there's a workbook that comes out of it because every chapter has 3 or 4 questions. So I am also providing a workbook that they can just use the book themselves and create their own way to record the answers.
Yeah.
But I'm a fellow traveler, Rena, just a fellow traveler.
I love that.
Toolkit.
I love that. And the length of the book doesn't matter. It's the content, it's the value that you add. That's what counts. And then you have another one planned.
So the tennis story, which I call it a miracle, because it really is a town of 20,000 people building this thing the way we did it. And what was happening, people were coming into our facility and saying, oh, it must have been nice that the city built this for you. And my back would go up and I'd just lose my mind. And I'd go, that's my fault, or it's our fault. We have never told our story. And with the coaching hat on, I'm telling the story, but I'm also, what did we learn from this? Not how to, but what did we learn from this? Because other communities are trying to build big things. So it's a 2-part book, and I'm struggling a little bit with the layout entirely, but it's the story with some anecdotal fun stuff in there, but then it's also what did we learn? So that if you're a community, if you're trying to build something, these are the things we learned. So it's in the mix. It's about 60% done, but I'll have it done by the end of the year.
Oh, wow. Good. I'm looking forward to both of them.
Well, thanks.
When do you expect this one to come out?
I really hope that by the end of June, there's going to be an e-version and then there's going to be a hard copy. So I'm just working out the details. And I'm not a technical guy, so I'm relying on my publisher and my website person to kind of the backroom stuff. So I'm hoping that gets done by June 30th.
All right. Look forward. That's not far. So
No.
My last question. What advice, if you were to give an advice to a business owner or somebody who's at that space where they're wanting to scale up, what is that one advice that you would give to them?
I can only speak personally, but if you know your values, if you know what the most important thing to you is, for me, it was integrity and independence. So if you know why you're doing it, I think you really have to go like, why do I want this growth? Because I think the why will help you with the how. And I think before we run off and try to do all these big things, I think we really have to step back and really gut check that. Why do I want this? Because if I want it so badly, then the how, you might approach it with different hows. Honestly, I find the how it wasn't easy, but it was easy to take steps to try to find my way to get to the why. But if I didn't know the why, then the how would be in the dark. So I would just have gut check to say, hey, why do I want this? And realistically put some measurables around it, like try to quantify it, try to define it as best you can. Because what I've learned through coaching is, and what I learned when I drew that letter or that picture 30 years ago, I wouldn't look at that for probably a year or two sometimes, but it was up here. It was forever in there. And by doing that, everything I did, whether I could never really attribute it back to that picture, but it was burning inside. It was in my subconscious. So once I knew that's where I wanted to go, then the hows started to show up. So that's my best advice.
It's priceless, honestly. And I love the value piece to it, that when you know while you are doing all that, if you can stay true to yourself along the way. And it came out in your own story as well when you tried to do that sale to the young family, and it showed up. And to stay true to that throughout your journey, then it can be fulfilling.
Yeah, it's my story. And I didn't know my values until I sat on a stage with Christian in 2022 in front of 30 colleagues, and he had a values exercise. I'm actually able to define my top 5 values. I never knew them, like I could never name them all the way through, but Your values can change, but they rarely do. And the order of the values stay the same too, which is what I learned in that exercise, even just by the smallest amount. Like my first value is integrity, my second's independence. So if I've made a decision where I put independence ahead of integrity, that would gnaw at me until I fixed it. And I wasn't saying that one wasn't important. One was just slightly more important. Like integrity is always slightly more important than independence, because I'm never going to do anything like that story revealed that to me. It's like I'm not going to become financially independent at the sake of somebody else's. I just won't do that. So I knew that. And then my third value is truth. And I'm not saying truth is super important to me, but the other ones are more important to me. So integrity picks up truth in a way, right?
Yeah.
So the values exercise, I do that with clients too. That's one of my coaching things. We'll take one session and we just do that. It's a very thorough, mentally exhausting exercise, but people come out of that knowing their 3 to 5 top values. And they tell me that they look at back in their life when they were living incongruently, and they could go back and say, that's why I was incongruent, because I put that value ahead of that value, or I didn't have any value in play. And now going forward, for me, I look at those values, I go, okay, like it's a nice little thing for me to go, does it check these things in these order? Because I'll know I'll be out of sorts until it does. So
I did that for myself. I didn't know if that's an exercise, but for me, for myself, I just listed out all the values that didn't work for me, that were part of my life. I didn't want to have them in my life, and why I didn't want to have them in my life. They show up in your lived experiences.
one of the things that I steal from my favorite book in the world is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. If I could only read one book, it would be that book. And the exercise that blew my mind, I did it in my late 20s, was the funeral exercise. You know the exercise. So a part of the values exercise I go through is I have people do that, and they give me their answers, and then I extrapolate the values out of there, and then I make a list, and then I say to them, are these the values that resonate with you? And they say, yeah, that's it. Because out of those types of questions, the most important things in your life pop out. That's where the values pop out with me.
Yeah. I wrote down all the things that I value, all the incidences, the people, and what showed up, what value showed up in that, and that this is what I want. So that's how I extracted. But yeah, to your point, it's the same thing. And it made so much of a difference. And you're quite right. Though there are some value that there is an order, and it rarely changes, because there can be shifts as it'll be true to that incident that you'll have to weigh two values, and you might have to make a choice.
That's true. That's what I've learned.
All right. So this was great, Winston. I totally loved it and loved your story. And I look forward to the books. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you to your listeners who hopefully gleaned something from it. But I appreciated the opportunity. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you.